Since the beginning of the year, Ukraine has hit more than a dozen major targets in the peninsula that play important roles in the Russian military strategy in Crimea itself and in Russian-occupied southern Ukraine. This has included attacks on Russian airbases, radar stations, and communications points, along with the destruction of multiple Russian air defense systems. Ukraine is now preparing for a new attack on Crimea. Telegram channel Krymsky Veter reports that Russian forces are setting up shelters and firing points along the road from Chernomorskoye to Yevpatoria and further to Sake. Locals report that the Russians have set up fortifications of concrete and sandbags along the entire road. Enemy personnel are also stationed along the highway and at intersections. The enemy troops explain such preparations by the need to repel possible attacks by the Ukrainian military. However, this version is most likely nothing more than a cover. The thing is that the occupiers need to use the funds allocated for defense, but half of them have already been stolen. That is why they are setting up fortifications in Crimea. Recently, Ukrainian intelligence officers carried out large-scale attacks on Russian occupiers' facilities in Crimea for several days in a row. In particular, a helicopter, the ship Fyodor Uryupin, and more than 10 radar stations were hit. Earlier it also became known that Ukrainian intelligence officers attacked the Tor M2 anti-aircraft missile system of the occupation forces, and drones of the Rgumagu Special Forces Unit attacked Russian ships in Crimea. Let us recall that media wrote that in March, unmanned systems of the Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine attacked Crimea for several days. The strikes were carried out on Russian radar stations, air defense systems, sea vessels, and even a helicopter. Another key aspect of Ukraine's campaign against the Russian occupation of Crimea is the targeting of key logistics routes. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began more than a decade ago, Moscow has sought to militarize Crimea. Following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the peninsula has served as a key logistical hub for Russian forces fighting in southern Ukraine. Despite the development of additional overland rail routes connecting Russia to occupied regions of mainland Ukraine, Crimea continues to play an important logistical role in the war. In a bid to weaken the Russian army's supply chains and isolate Crimea, Ukraine has targeted the ferries used to transport military supplies across the Kerch Strait from Russia to Crimea.